So, make sure you know the distinction between the two. Technology means the use of science to solve daily problems. Now, people can use certain scientific mechanisms to have class, to have conference with students or colleagues worldwide. All these scientific mechanisms, they use logics of programming, they use logic of physics, they use logic of maybe computer engineering, electrical engineering, you name it. When they create all these gadgets, customer service, now sometimes they are not always in the US, we all know that. So nowadays, people use scientific mechanisms to solve daily problems. When there is a snowstorm, we don't have to come to work. Even in the 90s, when I was in college, there is a way, even it wasn't as sophisticated, for people to do teleconferencing, to do phone conferencing, to share files among one another. This is what we mean by technology. So, even in the 90s, in many first world countries, bad weather, snowstorm is not going to affect the test to be completed or meeting the deadlines, not so much. Because technology serves as the backbone of this society. Are we clear? And media means something different from technology. Make sure you know it. Media is anything in print, anything digital, or anything electronic. Media has something to do with communicating with one another. So, after the Stone Age, we know Stone Age did not expire or end because people ran out of stone. Stone Age ends because of technological advancement. People figure out a way to invent other things, to jot down, to write down their thoughts, their opinions through other mechanisms like paper. People invented paper. So remember, Stone Age did not expire because people back then ran out of stone. So when printing press came about, there was a new invention, a big breakthrough hundreds of years ago when printing press came around. And mind you, people were not as innocent back then when printing press came about. People back then, they criticized one another. They challenged other people's opinion through the printing press by publishing pamphlets, books, through writing columns on newspaper. Now, it's even easier for them to disagree with another person, with another group, when printing press came about compared to the Stone Age. People weren't innocent. So, people do that more and more. It makes it even easier for people to do that. When social media came around, with Facebook, with Twitter, people challenge each other even more frequently, even easier. The same thing for electronic means of communications. Are we clear? Make sure you know the difference between these two words. They mean different. Technology and media, okay? Okay. So, your books have all this definition, the chapter. So, e-readiness means ability to sort, interpret, and process info online, or to process digital and electronic info. This is what we mean by e-readiness. And digital divide. I just copy and paste all the definitions from your book to here. So it doesn't matter where you look. Digital divide means unequal access to technology based on racial ethnic groups, based on social class, and based on where you reside, which part of the country you reside. So, I used to teach in Mississippi. The Mississippi Delta today, it remains one of the poorest area in your country, in the US. So, I will never forget until the day I die, I swear. I had a few online students, and my colleagues had online students too. When that particular course is only offered online, and sometimes these students who also happens to be commuters, they live in certain parts of Cleveland, Mississippi, the poorer parts of the town. So they don't have internet subscription at home. Maybe their parents or themselves cannot or could not afford internet subscription. So this is what they do. They drive to campus no matter how long the drive is. They will go to the library. They will go to the computer lab. They will stay all day in the library or computer lab. They will listen to all their online lectures. They will do all their assignments in the library or computer lab because they cannot do it at home. So this implies that it defeats the purpose of online education. Students don't have the means to access all these learning materials at home, to do assignments at home. So they drive to campus and they stay all day on campus. They are not very different from in-class students, but they don't have a choice because that course is only offered online, and maybe they need that class to graduate that semester. They cannot delay their graduation, maybe due to financial aid or other reasons. This is what we mean by digital divide. Are we clear? And some areas, the better areas in Cleveland, Mississippi, students have no problem with internet access. They can afford internet subscription and they can meet deadlines. They can do assignments. This is what we mean by digital divide. Are we clear? And your book also mentioned net neutrality. It means that the internet service providers do not treat data equally when we talk about net neutrality. So, with net neutrality, it affects people's level of e-readiness because people have different ISPs. And this creates a knowledge gap. This in turn creates a knowledge gap. When we don't have net neutrality, it creates disparities in e-readiness. This in turn lead to knowledge gap. And maybe if this is taken into extreme, it creates a kind of digital divide. Are we clear? And sometimes people's levels of e-readiness can determine the level of government control in any given country. Maybe depending on the political system or the economic system in a given country, the government may think that, oh, I think people living in this country, they may know too much. They seem to be overly critical, quote unquote, on Twitter, on other social media platforms. And the government may impose certain censors mechanisms or certain control to limit what their citizens can or cannot post on the internet or on Twitter, on Facebook. Many governments in this world, they still do that. So, people's level of e-readiness in a given country can determine the level of government control. And the government in some countries Oh, mind you, they are expert in big data too. They are expert in data warehousing. They are expert in machine learning. It's not difficult or challenging for them to enforce all kinds of control mechanisms on the social media. Question so far? Okay. This is what we mean by evolutionary model of technological change. Initially, we have this old-fashioned phone before our days. We only see that when we ask Dr. Google, right? And then the phone evolved into a rotary phone. Has anybody seen a real rotary phone in your house? Maybe somewhere. Students in my other class, the later class, they say they have it in their grandparents' home, in the attic or somewhere. Then the rotary phone evolved into something like this. We still have this in our school, in our offices, maybe at home. And car phones. Has anybody seen an actual car phones? Yeah? People still sell them, I think, in some stores, right? Where did you see that? They still use it. It's in their house somewhere. Okay? So, when I was in middle school in the late 80s, car phones were considered a luxury. My uncle, who was in the insurance business before he retired, because of the nature of his job, he had to have a car phone. And because the cars is constantly moving, right? So it's hard to track where the calls came from. And because of that, sometimes if they want to make international or long distance call, they figure out it's cheaper to do it through a car phone back then. And that time, I show you my family's picture, my aunt's picture, my second family in Pennsylvania, right? So we always talk to my aunt in Pennsylvania as a family as a whole during our lunar Chinese New Year. So that was what we did. We all gathered around my uncle's car phone. He will make the call and everybody took turns to talk, whoever wanted to talk. Because it was cheaper to make calls through a car phone instead of a landline or home phones. And after that, this is what we have. It has gotten more sophisticated and smaller. We can keep this in our pocket. All these gadgets were bigger back then, right? Including car phone. Now we have smartphone or iPad or iPhone. Are we clear? Okay. This is another example of evolutionary model of technological change. Back then, there were a lot of people who frequented record stores in countries throughout the world. When I was growing up, we liked to hang out in record store. But now, it seems that record store, there are very few people and some went out of business, right? And in the late 90s or so, some were being replaced by Napster. And then they were being replaced almost again by YouTube. And I don't know what is after YouTube. I'm cheap. I get all the somewhat outdated movies or I watch the news on YouTube. I'm cheap. I don't have a TV. So anybody knows what is after YouTube? Netflix? Amazon Prime? Or they are on equal basis? I don't know. I'm sure there's something after YouTube. So this is another manifestation of evolutionary model of technological change. Are we clear? And this is another evolutionary model of technological change through different types of media and technology. Initially, we have newspaper. Sometimes people from different political factions in different countries, they challenge each other through different columns on newspaper. In our parents' days, in my teenage years, In my high school years, people did that. Those were before the days of social media. And has anybody seen this transistor radio, the real one, not Dr. Google, the one Dr. Google showed us? Okay, Ahmed, where did you see that?
Well, in Africa, my dad used to own a radio, and we used to listen to it every day
Mm-hmm.
to get the news of what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I used to listen to that kind of radio.
Is the signal good?
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, depends on how you tune it.
Yeah,
If you are good, yeah. So he still has one?
no, he doesn't have one right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Has anybody seen a stereo or mini compo? A real one? Not the one with Google and Dr. Google showed us. Has anybody seen a real one? And now this is bulky for us. We use our iPhone, iPads, or computers to listen to music. Or sometimes we can go to different radio channels on our phone. And it's more convenient. The gadget is a lot smaller compared to this giant. Has anybody seen this before? This old TV. Now it's an antique. Maybe you can make a fortune. Has anybody seen this, a real one, before? So, I had this when I was a kid in 82. This was a luxury in homes. My parents had to save for months to get this. And I remember when I was in college, my ex-roommate said, she was from China. So she could come abroad and people envy her, people back home. That was the 90s. She got a scholarship to come. So people envy her, people back home. When she wrote back, she said, I could own a TV more high-tech like this, but not as high-tech as this. Her TV was in between this and this. And her friends back home envy her. And many of my homies, American or people from other countries, if they save enough from their work study money or from their earnings, they could get a TV. Not so high-tech, but something in between. So, even in the 90s in America, TVs weren't expensive. People could get one for a couple hundred of dollars. And in Asia, even for myself, I did not have a TV. So, like my ex-roommate, she wrote back to her friends back home. She told them, I own a TV now. People envy her. Because it did not take her long to save for a TV. So, this is another example of evolutionary model of technological change. And now, TVs have gotten lighter with LCD panels and whatnot. And some people connect their laptops to the TV or computers to the TV to watch stuff from other countries. Okay. You need to know this for your final. And your final is not cumulative. Your final is whatever after the midterm. Are we clear? So, let's read the definition on your own for a few minutes. Let's take a moment to read the definition. I think you can find this, the PowerPoint, on the course shell, right? You can find this. I haven't converted that to a PDF file, but you can find the PPT version, right? So you can either look on your gadget or on the screen. So, if our gadgets, our iPhone, iPad, smartphone, and whatnot are meant to last forever, Apple, Samsung are going to go out of business. And because of that, we have the concept called planned obsolescence. It means that gadgets are bound to fail at some point in time. They are not meant to last forever. If they are meant to last forever, Apple may not be here for long. Samsung may not be here for long. And your book also talks about mainstream news are either homogenized or fragmented. You have different news channel, ABC, CNN, Fox, NBC, you name it, other smaller channels on the TV or on YouTube. And some of these channels are either more right-wing or more left-wing. We figure this out. This is a manifestation of how our news are fragmented. And the same thing for news from other countries. Now, I'm from Malaysia, and we just had a change of prime minister. The guy who stepped down, who resigned, is in his mid-90s. And some news channels, they are more agreeable to this decision. And some news channels, they still think that it's not a good idea. So, many news channels in many countries are fragmented. Like nowadays, the coronavirus, some think that different governments in different parts of the world, they are doing the right thing. They have a good handle of things. And some news channel, some YouTubers through their own channels, or some news channels operated by companies, they identify areas that need improvement. And some channels by individuals or companies outrightly thinks that no, the government overlooks certain things. This is not what they are supposed to do. So this tells us that our information available via different social media platforms are fragmented, and yet they are homogenized. We can classify groups of people on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, who are for or against or on middle ground on a specific issue. So we see homogenization and fragmentation with all this info being shared and presented online. Are we clear? Okay. This is what we mean by media globalization. The world is integrated through the media when we have exchange of ideas from people living in different parts of the world. And we also have media consolidation, where the media outlets are controlled by a few people, powerful people, rich people. When we have media consolidation, we have oligopoly, where a few big companies control the market segment of the media. We see that in many countries, oligopoly. Apple, Samsung, Dell, they control the market segments of laptops, computers. And they share different functionalities of the different products they have through the media, and people can see it on YouTube, on other social media platforms. How is a Mac 15-inch different from a Mac 11-inch? Or how is a MacBook Pro different from the MacBook Air? They can share the features of their products through media globalization, right? And other examples of media consolidation or even media globalization and oligopoly would be Disney. Most of the kids' movies are still from Disney. And certain internet company, they dominate a larger market share in a given location. We know that. The same thing can be said for phone companies. And certain news channels, they dominate the media in certain locations. So these are all examples of media globalization, media consolidation, and oligopoly. And sometimes, nowadays, it's easy to learn another language We don't have to register for a course at a university. We don't really have to pay for a course. We can just download an app. When we go abroad, the app can translate for us and we can ask questions accordingly. It's not rocket science these days. So, all these language apps may be another example of media globalization or even media consolidation. Are we clear? And when we have media globalization, it's easy to share info online. Cultural diffusion, the transmission of material and non-material culture, is bound to take place when we have media globalization. People through YouTube, through other social media platforms, can see how a gadget is being used, what are the latest products and services, from their own living rooms, through their own computers and laptops. When we have cultural diffusion, it's very likely we have cultural change. People may think drinking coffee from a high-end coffee shop is better than drinking tea. It leads to a cultural change. And people may think wearing clothes in a certain way is easier, it's more convenient, it saves time. Wearing their hair in a certain way, it saves time. They don't have to spend so much time getting ready for school and for work. It leads to a culture change. Look at how we are dressed today, regardless of where we came from originally. Look at how we are dressed today, right? I'm not dressed very differently from you. It's convenient, it's easy. And my hair, despite I have a different hair color, we may have different hair colors, but can we say that we are dressed almost the same? It's because of all these things that takes place. Can you see that? And sometimes with cultural change, it can be cultural imperialism. People, especially some people in Asia, I'm not sure about China or East Asia, but in Southeast Asia, many pizza places are high-end restaurants, even Pizza Hut or Shakey's in the days. Now it changed a bit. In the days, in the 80s or early 90s, when I was in middle and high school, they were high-end restaurants. And I got a shock when I came for college here. Pizza Hut, Domino's are places like a fast food restaurant. They are not very high end. They are not very high end, right? And they are places where students go to or students order through phone back then when they don't have time to cook. They are not very high end. But in Asian countries, even until the late 90s, they were high-end restaurants. They were set up in a way like they are waiters and waitresses that greet people, seat people. They are like a high-end restaurants in Southeast Asia. I think even to these days, some of them. So, some people in Asia may think that, wow, pizza is high class. Maybe I should substitute rice with pizza to feel some kind of social prestige or something, to feel different, to feel good. So when they have this mindset, cultural imperialism takes place. Maybe Coca-Cola is way better than their traditional beverages. Again, cultural imperialism takes place when they have this mindset. Are we clear? Okay. Not to offend anybody here when I share this. And this website tells us about government control to some degree in different social media platforms in North Korea. And in China, the Weibo is similar to Twitter in America. And I think QQ, correct me if I'm wrong, QQ and the Weixin is quite similar to the Snapchat or WhatsApp, the Snapchat in America or the WhatsApp in Malaysia. So these are the different social media platforms used in other countries. And not to offend anybody, China, they have something called the social credit system. I think it's through the phone. If I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, I think it's through a gadget like a phone, and people can be tracked through that gadget whenever they go to certain public places or the store. It can keep track of what people buy in grocery store. And because of that, government can figure out their health burdens depends on the items people used to purchase in stores. They can gauge whether their citizens is going to be or is not going to be a health burden to the government in years to come through this app, through this mechanism, the social credit system, or whether somebody is speeding or somebody jaywalk or litter. The government can figure out pretty quickly. So, different countries have different social media platforms. Are we clear? Okay. Now we have technological globalization and technological diffusion. So, cross-cultural development of technology can be easily shared in other parts of the world. Initially through the European immigrants, they instill the notion of insecticide or DDT spraying when they go to other continents for raw materials from markets for their products. They introduced this new technique. Back then, maybe it was through writing or the print media or verbally or just demonstration. They show the local farmers how to do it. And nowadays, people learn about organic planting sometimes by watching YouTube. They know it's better than the insecticide spraying in their crops, in their plants, in their farmlands. People learn how to do organic farming, sometimes through the social media platforms. And when an app is being invented, the functionalities of that app can be easily broadcasted through all these social media platforms, right? Another manifestation of technological globalization and diffusion. The same thing for MRIs, ultrasounds, X-rays. When they are being invented, how they are being used, why should they be used, can be spread to other parts of the world through initially something in writing, something through printing, and later on through different social media platforms, or sometimes through scientific research. And nowadays, with the invention of PDF, people can easily access scientific papers from another parts of the world to learn about new improvements in all these scanning devices, right? And the same thing for scan and go. When it was invented, many countries easily adopt that. It's a manifestation of technological globalization and diffusion. The same thing for hydroponic agriculture. Do you know what is hydroponic agriculture? It's a way of planting that does not involve the soil. I think it's adopted quite frequently in Japan, or Japan right after the World War II, because there were many earthquakes in Japan or other natural disasters. So I think Japanese, through collaboration with other first world countries, when they tried to develop about 50 years ago or 60 years ago, they discovered this new technique of planting to circumvent natural disasters. This is another manifestation of these two concepts. Are we clear? Hydroponic agriculture techniques. Are we clear? Question? Okay. So, not to offend anybody here is not my intention. I apologize beforehand if I offended anybody. If you Google, you ask Dr. Google or Dr. Safari, you Google this phrase, Tiananmen Square death toll. the numbers can range from a few hundred to a few hundred thousands. That's a wide range. It hasn't been really ascertained about the death toll for Tiananmen Square. But when we Google the number of reported cases or deaths for SARS in 2003, we get a smaller range for these numbers. This is another manifestation of technological globalization and diffusion. With these two things taking place, it's easier to share info online through different mechanisms. So because of that, the range for these numbers tends to be closer when you compare to an event that took place in the late 80s, like the Tiananmen massacre. Maybe government in different countries, not to offend my students in this class, I think they are more cautious because they know the whole world is watching them. So they check and check and check their formulas, their calculations before they report their numbers because they know it's a lot easy to access those reports and numbers through the social media. So governments tend to be more careful with technological globalization and diffusion. Are we clear? Okay. Are we done? Oh, cool. Okay. Any question? Let's see. Okay. Maybe we are done. Oh.